Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Barrens Chat podcast. I'm Sod, and with me tonight is my co-host Guck. This is a podcast about World of Warcraft by two guys who play. Guck, pretty slow week in WoW, somewhat uneventful. How'd the week go? How was your reset and your rating in Classic?
Yeah, slow in content and slow in game. We didn't really have any new guild announcements. We haven't really put our hat in the ring to contest for the world bosses yet. So nothing really new. You know, the standard Molten Core clear, getting through Onyxia. Unfortunately, nothing really new to report from Classic. What about retail?
Pretty much more the same. It was a dungeon event. I did like my keys, and I pretty much just messed around. I did a little bit of gold and transmog farm, but nothing really new to report. Still searching for the right guilds with appropriate raid times for me. It's trying not to settle, so really no news on that. The information about the jailer leaked. It caused kind of a riffle on Twitter. A lot of people unhappy about it, like the data mining and the leaks. They kind of want to see it as Blizzard announces it, not as, I guess I would call it like a journalist in a sense, like a WoW journalist, a WoW content creator dropping the information. I think that's their job, that's their content, and I don't have a problem with it. How'd you feel about it, and what'd you think about the leak?
I feel like getting upset about these leaks, it's kind of your own fault if you get like this information spoiled to you. You can't really be exposed to these leaks without already being worked into the data mining community that's already present in WoW and has been present for a very long time. You have to go to Wowhead or MMO Champion. You have to be subscribed to or at least watch Pyromancers or other different World of Warcraft content creators. Bellular, to some extent, covers these leaks. Taliesin and Evitel, when they do the leaks, they have a spoiler warning. So there are even grades of content that you can consume that some of them will have spoilers and some of them will have leaks, but by choosing what you consume, you can basically outright avoid spoilers entirely if you don't go down the data mining rabbit hole. So I find people being upset about it to be kind of just like complainers, and that's the vibe that you get on the forums. Like the people that are posting on the forums are by and large just complainers. I don't think it's a huge leak. So looking at it, it's basically just a piece of concept art, which can tell a lot. I mean, the style of it is really telling, and that's why people are jumping to the conclusion that, the jailer is probably a Titan or some form of Titan. And it's definitely telling in the art style. He looks just like them, same kind of size, same kind of scope. We've seen him at scale with Sylvanas, and it's a massive hulking creature. So I think there's merit to it. I don't think it tells much besides the fact that he might be a Titan. Like what does this leak do for the game?
Yeah, really nothing. It just puts a face on the at least main villain early in the expansion, which I think is cool. And I'm with you on the leaks. Like if you're not like on Wowhead or MMO Champion, you're not gonna see it. And then like even then, I just saw it erupt on Twitter, and like I didn't click on it, and I had no idea what was going on other than people were upset until just before the show I looked at it. So like it's cool. It doesn't bother me. Like I like reading WoW leaks, and I like getting as much information about the game as possible because that makes me enjoy it more. So that's kind of where I stand on that.
Yeah, and you go out and find WoW content, and the content that you find has included in the past data mined stuff, and that's why you find these new data mined tidbits. It's something that like anyone who uses YouTube or Google or whatever, the search algorithms become they start to analyze what you search for, and they suggest that content. You're not really out of the blue going to be suggested a huge data mine spoiler unless it's a like wildly popular video. So yeah, I find the spoilers to be fine. I think it's a great little piece of information for people who do like to speculate. When we got the supposed leaks for Shadowlands, we've come now to find out that they were only correct for the name and everything else was wrong. But it's a nice thing to just kind of speculate. You run your mind, you think about what certain things could be connected. Sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong. But this is all content that people can choose to consume, and you don't have to if you don't want to. Unless you have friends that, like, the minute they hear about something, they tell you about it, and they don't give you that buffer. I mean, that's kind of on you for not telling them, hey, don't just spoil shit for me. Give me a little bit of a buffer so I can tell you whether or not I want to hear about this leak or the spoiler.
Yeah, and any video that you watch too on like any YouTuber's channel is gonna have a spoiler leak on it. So it's like, oh, all right, maybe I don't want to watch this. So there's really no reason to get upset about it. Like, just don't watch it. Stay off the internet. Tell your friends you don't want to hear about it, and you'll be fine.
The videos they have appropriate titles to kind of catch your attention about, hey, this is a leak, this is a potential spoiler. That's what attracts people to those videos. So if you watch that video and then you're like, oh man, I got something spoiled, I just don't, I have no empathy for that.
No, not at all. And we're, this week, like, other than that leak, we're really like light on WoW news. So you and I both thought it'd be a good idea to talk about, like, probably one of my favorite raid tiers. I'm not sure about you, but it's a raid tier like that you and I really came up, that like that's how we became friends, really, in that raid tier. And that's Nighthold. I thought that was an awesome raid tier. It was probably the most fun I've had in WoW, and since Burning Crusade, and it, like, just like we had such a good community, and like a good thing going, and we made a lot of mistakes in it. What would you think about Nighthold? How'd you like it?
I agree. I would say Nighthold's probably my favorite raid tier for a multitude of reasons. So for people who aren't aware, the Nighthold is the second main raid tier in Legion. So this was our last expansion in retail. We started off Legion with the Emerald Nightmare. After that, there's this kind of mini raid tier, the Trial of Valor. That's the 3-boss raid with Halia at the end. And after that's Nighthold. So the Nighthold was I think one of the greatest raids, not only because of its kind of intangible effects, like the fact that we had a fun raid and all that stuff, but the fact that it was the Gul'dan raid. The fact that at the end of this you had the Gul'dan fight, and at the time, before you looked into the Mythic fight, there was actually a lot of mystery around this secret phase that was in the Mythic Gul'dan fight. So the scope of it, the mystery, the climactic nature. I mean, Gul'dan is a serious boss in the WoW universe. And also the fact that we had a new raid group that we were leading, and it was fun, and we were initially really meeting the bar that we set for ourselves, and performing well. It was just, yeah, it's one of the most stunning visually. It's a fantastic raid. Yeah, I love the Nighthold.
Yeah, I think it just had like the perfect balance of bosses too, right? Like, you look at the first three bosses, and like, going in normal and heroic, and even mythic. Like, in mythic, I guess it takes a little bit of time to figure them out, but for the most part, those first three bosses, Scorpyron, Chronomatic Anomaly, and then Trilliax, they're pretty, not gimme bosses in mythic like they are in like heroic and normal, but like, they require work and coordination, and like mechanics that need to be done. But like, I thought they were, overall good fights. They had, mechanics that weren't really, you didn't see too much in other fights, like especially like Chronomatic Anomaly, and I guess Trilliax as well. So like, those fights were a lot of fun for us, and like, we struggled a lot on Trilliax. That was probably like one of our worst bosses, and it was such an easy boss, like that one. And botanists were just really hard for our guild, because like, everybody's so focused on parsing well that they forget to do the mechanics, and it really hurts you. But a ton of fun on those first three bosses, especially for me as a warlock on Scorpyron, that nobody would ever come close to my damage no matter how bad I did on it. So I really love that fight.
Yeah, it was because of the strategy that we ended up doing on farm, right? Where you essentially, instead of letting the scorpions fill the perimeter, you stack the boss on the mouth of the cave where all of the scorpions are coming from, and it's just like a massive monster cleave, right?
Yep. Oh yeah. And I just throw out Seed of Corruption and just watch everything die and watch my damage skyrocket. I loved watching those fights. Like, and I was new to Warlock at the time of Nighthold too, so I really learned how to play the class in there, and that was a ton of fun for me too. Like, even though like I didn't always parse well, especially on those like Trilliacs and like Botanists, because I was more mechanic focused and damage focused, but like it was still a ton of fun, and it's really like that whole raid is an experience, like learning through Mythic and grinding through that, like as you know, a leader in the guild, you more so as a raid leader, like just kind of going through that together. That was a ton of fun.
Yeah, and I think something that you kind of touched on earlier, there were very unique fights throughout the entire Nighthold. I thought that Scorpyron was a really interesting take on line of sight because you had to line of sight the boss with its like projected scales, but the different colored scales would have different effects, like AoE effects in Mythic. So you had to choose like which ones you're behind, and there were so fewer scales that like you really had to make that choice quickly. That I thought was really fun, and that was the first boss. And yeah, I mean the first three in the basement of the Nighthold, you feel like you're getting into the raid and it's an introduction because once you leave after Trilliax, you zone into what appears to be the actual palace within Suramar. It's basically the same thing that you can fly over with the Nighthold. And you start what feels like the raid 2.0, like Nighthold 2.0. Um, I really, really liked it. I loved it. I found that the variety in Scorpyron, in from the tank perspective, Spellblade Ariel actually was kind of fun in Mythic, even though it got to be really, really difficult and ultimately broke our guild. The mechanic of having these extra types of the boss add like spawn in and have to tank them each differently, it was a really fun challenge. Way more so than, your fights like Crosus, which every raid gets, but Crosus was definitely the kind of like learn the dance, do the dance, collect the loot. It was not a difficult fight.
Yeah, it was pretty much just a DPS check, and which can be tough for guilds, especially guilds that struggle to find members, and then of course you're finding members, but maybe they're not effective raiders, so you either have to train them or find new members. So I mean, that's really, we spent a lot of time on Crosus that I don't think we should have spent on him, but I mean, it was just one of those things. Like, I was a recruitment officer for the guild, and I really did my best to make sure that we had 20 guys to go every week in Mythic, and it was really hard to find those people to just push us over the edge.
So, thinking about the Nighthold, we encountered basically the kind of what felt like designed walls. There were difficulties at Crosus, difficulties at Spellblade. I would say in Heroic, we hit a wall at was it Ellison or was it at Gul'dan? I know we hit a wall kind of towards the end.
I think we spent more time on Alisand than we did Gul'dan, but we definitely hit that wall at Gul'dan. That fight definitely, it wasn't something that you could walk over early until you really figured it out, and then you just kind of nailed it. It got easier from there, like any fight, really. I mean, you just get the DPS up, and people get used to the mechanics, and you can ignore mechanics, and you just kind of blow through it. But Elisand, I think mechanically, was probably where we spend most of our time, is dodging those circles coming through, and certainly no easy task, and it took our guild a long time to really figure out like the dance on that fight.
Yeah, that was there were the I think the important thing about a raid having those intangible qualities are having those fights that are hurdles, but then also at an appropriate time getting over those hurdles. It's not about just getting in there and smashing the tier super quickly. Sometimes it is nice to have those really difficult bosses for your group that you guys someday overcome. The issue is when that day is delayed weeks and weeks and weeks by some of the same people making usually the same mistakes.
Yeah, 100%, and that's where, like, I don't know, like we didn't spend weeks at like on heroic. I would say we progressed through heroic pretty quickly, and like when we started our guild, we initially started in heroic. We spent little to no time in normal, like we'd already been there, done that, and like we left our guild that we were in because of like favoritism and bad raid leadership, not being able to start on time or keep the raid going. So we just said, all right, screw it, we'll start our own guild, and we really just went hard at it, recruited, and we started with 4 people, and we pushed Mythic within like a month and a half, and got our AOTC, and really just pushed into the content. We had a ton of fun, and we found like a good community of just like-minded people, and we went through the bosses on heroic like relatively easily, got past our guild's progression in our first raid. We had to pug a lot, and we tried to recruit through pugs. I think a lot of people enjoyed pugging with us because we were pretty, like, I don't know, like we were loud and obnoxious, but I think we, like, people could tell that we were fun to be around. So we kind of recruited through there, and then from there we grew and we hit progress. And as we kept killing bosses, we kept getting more recruits in trade chat, and from there we got to see mythic bosses. We pugged with another guild to just keep improving our characters, which is something that you have to do. And it definitely wasn't an easy tier to get through. Like AOTC, it took a lot of people a long time, and after a few weeks, we even started selling it to help the guild get consumables and just help our raiders get a little more gold. And that's definitely something that I miss, and I'm sure you miss a lot too. That nice economical boost that you get when you're boosting people.
Yeah, the boost, the idea behind a boost makes so much sense if you're someone that really actually enjoys your time playing WoW, but you don't enjoy your time spent farming in WoW. Because like for a lot of that raid tier when we were doing heroic sales, I would not bring my alts because I wasn't that concerned with gearing other tunes. I would just bring my main, and our policy was if you brought your main, the gold would be divided amongst the main raiders and one person that would be the guild bank. So that imaginary slot gets a fraction of the pool. And you can come on an alt, but you forfeit your share. You just get to have loot, and the carries, they get priority loot because they're paying. And we took, man, we would probably take 2 people. How many people do you think we took at maximum?
So this, I put in so much work for this every week. Actually, on like we'd sell it on Sunday night, so on Sunday I would go into trade chat, and at first we started small. We went with like 2, 3, and then at the end of the tier, like when AOTC was coming to an end, we were getting like 5, 6 carries every night. Our raiders were getting like 50,000 gold for a pretty simple ahead of the curve carry that was really nothing for us to kill, which was awesome. And everybody just had fun. Most people took their mains because they were getting paid, and even though I wanted to gear out and all, like I wanted the run to go smoothly, so I'd pop on my main and I would just mix it up, try some different talents, approach fights a different way, see what I can do to improve myself. That's kind of how I looked at it, and made a little bit of gold in the process. I will never hit the amount of gold that I had in Legion ever again. That I'm sure of.
Yeah, that was the like pinnacle WoW, paying for your game time with in-game efforts entirely, and then also bringing that money to the auction house to get geared up. It's that's just peak WoW. That's peak WoW goblin time.
That is peak WoW, and like it's not that hard to play your class effectively, right? You figure out the rotation. If you're struggling with it, and you can tell if you are by looking at the logs, then you just go to a YouTube video, see how to do the opening rotation, where you want to change your talents around, and you figure it out, and then you can sell Mythic Plus carries, you can sell heroic clears. I mean, you can really be an effective player and really market yourself out there to a guild that's more progressed than you, which is what I'm doing right now. My IO score isn't where I need it to be. That's why I'm having a hard time getting into groups, but I'm desperately searching for a guild that's pushing into Mythic, Eternal Palace, and I'm really like marketing myself, and I always talk about my experience in Nighthold every time I apply to a guild, because that's where I have the most mythic experience and I can talk to people a lot about it.
Yeah, and we didn't just get mythic raiding experience. We were like from the ground up constructing a guild, a raid team, the really rigid 20-man roster that we needed. That was all, something that we did during the tier, and we still ended up getting past that kind of major wall. So every raid, more or less, there's an early wall, and that's a real major wall where you'll see a pretty stark decrease in the percentage of guilds that end up clearing it when you check for those numbers on WoW Progress or something like that. And like you think of Fetid Devourer in Uldir, you think of Queen Ashvane or Lady Ashvane. I don't know if she's got the Queen title. She's just Lady Ashvane in Eternal Palace. In Nighthold, the big wall was Croesus, and it wasn't because of mechanics. It was largely because of the soft enrage, which was the bridge being destroyed, and the amount of DPS you needed to put out in that limited amount of time. And we ended up getting there, almost getting through 5 out of 10, which I think, considering the fact that we were a guild that started during the tier, that was really good.
Yeah, it was really good, and like Spellblade, I like I'm not gonna say it was a hard fight. It was very mechanic heavy. It required a lot of coordination on the range DPS part, and then it really just required like appropriate level of planning and awareness by all the other raiders after the range mechanic went out, and then we had issues with our tank, our off tank that we recruited in the middle of that tier. Our previous off tank, he got burnt out on Croesus, so we started recruiting a new tank, and we saw this guy in another guild. He was parsing really well. We were like, hey, we should try to talk to this guy, and you worked your magic. We kind of poached him, which, if I don't know, maybe some people have an opinion that that's a bad thing, but it's really like there's no rules when it comes to trying to progress in like against other guilds. And so we poached him. We thought he was going to be great. His numbers were awesome, but I just think his raid awareness and his ability to maneuver bosses around fights and through the mechanics wasn't there. And we were kind of looking at the on paper part of the tank as opposed to the intangibles that really sometimes can't be taught, not teach taught. And it was frustrating for us, and ultimately I would say that's probably where our guild downfall came in. At least like we hit like one of our walls there because of that, because we had like a mass exodus from the guild with that guy. And it was fine. I understand why he left, and I was actually kind of glad that he left. And but that's where we really struggled because of that.
Yeah, and the sad thing is we ended up getting a really great tank the next tier when we did Tomb of Sargeras, but it was just too little, too late. Some of our really big hitter guys, like not just numbers wise, but people that were important in the community, they had kind of quit WoW almost altogether. Some of them just stopped raiding, and it just kind of continued. The ball continued to roll downhill, less and less, passion about the game, fewer and fewer people to show up, and it ended up kind of being a big part of what ended our Legion rating by and large.
Yeah, and like I mean, I was doing a lot of the recruiting too. Like, it was like weird because like I would say Legion was pretty well populated with players, but like finding raiders was tough. So I had an add-on where I would whisper ungilded people and just ask if they were looking for a raiding guild. I wouldn't do the spam invite thing that you see a lot of other guilds would do, and I would ask them that, and then I would have a conversation with people based off that, and get them in the guild based off that. Didn't always nail good players for us, but I did find quite a few good people that were really good for our community and really involved with us. And that's an effective tool to use if you are starting a guild and trying to figure out how you can recruit people. I mean, just be active, look for those ungilded people.
Yeah, you had a really good in-game strategy. I tried to focus a lot on the out-of-game strategy. My idea there being that the people who engage in the third-party systems, the wowprogress.org, the warcraftlogs.com stuff, those people who tend to engage in that mean that they're really engaged in the game as well. and I can use the metrics that are present on these other sites as ways to, get a kind of a resume, a preemptive assessment of these raiders before they come into the raid group. So we had a really good balance of those two things going on. The health of Legion definitely helped bring in those candidates. It was, I think, early enough in the expansion where the RNG from the legendary system wasn't really taxing too many people. The issue with the legendaries was after you got a certain number of legendaries, it took a long time for the next one to drop. And if you got bad RNG on the earlier drops and you're waiting for potentially both or even just one of your best in slot legendaries, you could be waiting a long time. So the fact that Nighthold was the second major raid tier still had a lot of those really competent raiders who were still committed to either getting their legendaries or some of the luckier ones who already had both of their best in slots.
Yeah, and like I mean, at the end of the expansion, right? I had every single legendary on my warlock, and I had quite a few legendaries on other classes. I think in hindsight, looking back, Blizzard would probably like to do that system differently, and it looks like they are going to do it differently in Shadowlands. But I mean, that did really cause like issues with a lot of our raiders, and even like we had issues with loot trauma and all that. Not too much with loot trauma. I feel like we were pretty good with it, but we had a little bit of loot trauma issues. We had like maybe one healer leave because he didn't get that trinket on Augur, and we gave it to somebody on a different server that had been running with us for weeks over him, and I think he was really upset about that. But you got to make decisions to lead the guild, and ultimately it didn't work out for that guy. But we did well in that tier, and I think we made the right decisions for the most part.
Yeah, we ended up getting a lot out of that tier. Financially, we got a lot of good experience out of it. We got just the time spent enjoying WoW, which isn't, something to take for granted anymore. A lot of the people playing retail WoW, I don't think they're really enjoying it as much as we were back then because it's a community thing. Like I mentioned earlier, having those appropriate level benchmarks and then meeting them at an appropriate amount of time with a group of people, like that magnifies that experience, especially when you feel a strong part of that community. So, yeah, I mean, despite it kind of being the climax and thus denoting the end of that era, it was still, totally worth it. And I would not have changed how we played it. We played it well. We recruited people based on their enjoyment of the raid, and we didn't really change the raid for other people when they came in. We just let in a couple bad eggs that spoiled the whole thing for a lot of people. And some of the systems from Legion and retail in general tended to interfere with a lot of our stronger players. But yeah, I mean, Nighthold is always going to be one of those raids where I look back fondly on. If for some reason I'm flying around the Broken Isles and I see Suramar, I like to check it out. I like to fly over the Nighthold. I look at the area. I'm like, okay, that's where Tichondrius was. That's where Star Augur was. That's where that is the Nighthold. That's where Gul'dan, blew the top off of it. I look really fondly on that raid.
Yeah, I'm actually looking forward to like next expansion being able to actually solo it too. Like I I did love running through Nighthold, and it's kind of nice too because like obviously I didn't raid that much in previous expansions, so it's nice to be able to walk into like raid tiers like Emerald Nightmare and Trial of Valor and Nighthold and Tomb of Sargeras and just know your way around so you're not lost when you're trying to look for the bosses. I think that's really underrated about doing transmog runs.
Yeah, oh, definitely. And also not only transmog runs, but I think there's still that 1% chance to grab the Mythic Mount off of Gul'dan.
Yeah, and I mean that's pretty much what my gameplay right now has like consisted of. Like I did the dungeon event, so I did the 4 mythic dungeons or whatever on my warlock to get loot. I actually did get an upgrade out of that, which was awesome because I don't need that much. And I just like right now playing solo and WoW doesn't really do it for me. I'm still playing it. I'm still doing my transmog runs and trying to get, a couple mounts here and there, but really I'm just on to kill time and maintain my character's relevance going into the next tier while I look for a guild.
All right, that's kind of all I had for the people listening. If you guys enjoyed today, let us know. We definitely have a ton of content that we can generate on our own while there's this kind of drought from the WoW teams. So whether it's the diving into a raid tier or whether it's just kind of talking about guild management, yeah, we have a lot of stuff in the works that we could definitely talk about that are just kind of like we'll be kicking it. Um, while we just kind of wait. We're just kind of waiting until we get these leaks, we get these little bits of information that they give us. Obviously, next week we'll have a lot to talk about from Classic, as Battlegrounds will be out. Well, we unfortunately we by the time we record, we won't have any time in game to play them. But once you guys hear that episode, Battlegrounds will be out, so you guys will have something to go and do. But yeah, content's going to be a little low. So if you liked what we did today, let us know. You can hit us up on Twitter at Barrens Chat Pod, or drop a comment, leave a review, or anything like that on either the Apple Podcast or the Podbean app. And yeah, we'll incorporate that into our future content. All right, yeah, we'll see you next week.